Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to the Pervasive Media Studio Lunchtime Talk. So these talks are live every Friday at 1 p.m, both here in the building and live online. Hello online. So whether you're in Bristol or you're far away, you can join in the conversation. So my name is Martin O'Leary. I am the studio community lead here. I'm a white man in my 40s, long hair and a beard, wearing a blue jumper. Every Friday, we throw open the doors of the Pervasive Media Studio for Open Studio Friday, where we offer all of you the chance to spend some time in our space and hot desk alongside our residents and staff from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So especially big welcome to anyone who's new to the studio. Can anyone who's new to the studio put their hand in the air? Okay, yeah, we got a few today. This bit is for you. What is the Pervasive Media Studio? We're a diverse and collaborative community exploring creativity and technology, everything from comedy to coding and product development to performance art. And we're a partnership between Watershed, where we are right now, the University of the West of England, the University of Bristol, and we're funded by Arts Council of England. And what we do is we offer studio space, meeting rooms, events, and opportunities, all free to our residents as part of a spirit of generosity and mutual exchange. And we're a space for people to take risks with embryonic ideas and to make some time for collaboration. So a few notes before we begin. Please do feel free to move around. There's a kitchen over there behind you. You can make a cup of tea, grab some coffee, get a glass of water. Please don't use the microwave. It does funny things when you use the microwave. We have a quiet space just to, to my left and your right, just through there. So if you need to take a break at any point, you can just pop in. It's fairly well soundproofed. We are not expecting a fire alarm. So if you hear a fire alarm, that's probably real. And the studio team will direct you towards the fire exits. But in any event, they are at the other side of the studio. So again, my left, your right, down the far end at either side of the studio. And there are accessible toilets and a baby change. Don't see any babies right now, but you never know. In the corridor over there next to the kitchen. And there will be, sorry, can you give people a moment? There'll be a Q&A at the end of the talk. So for those of you who are watching online, you can pop your questions into the YouTube chat. Vic is here. She will be your voice in the room today. For everyone else, you can stick your hand up and we'll send a microphone around. Sorry, that's mine. You can get news on all of our future talks by going to watershed.co.uk/studio, at PM Studio UK on Twitter, at Pervasive Media Studio at mastodon.social on Mastodon, or at Pervasive Media Studio on Instagram. All right, is everyone settled now? Okay, great. Our speaker for today is perennial lunchtime talk favorite, Tim Kindberg. Tim is a writer, digital creative, and longtime studio resident. Today he's going to be talking about artificial intelligence, what it is, what it isn't, its real and illusory powers, and its spurious role in our society, all the way from illusion through delusion to hallucination. Tell us how you really feel. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Tim.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to see you all here. This is actually my third talk on AI in the studio. The last one was on AI politics, which is my preferred phrase to AI ethics. But this one's about AI epistemology. And we'll get to what that means exactly in a second. I picked a great time to be giving this talk because not only did OpenAI, the people behind ChatGPT, release Sora with its positively hallucinogenic videos just last week, watch the motion of the chair, watch the man who disappears completely behind another person and never reappears. It's also the week in which ChatGPT went berserk. So I picked a great time to be giving this. I'm going to be talking to you about 2 points today. I want to persuade you, first of all, that absolutely no meaning whatsoever is processed by software known as AI. And secondly, that there's a huge epistemological problem with AI, which nobody seems to be really worried about or addressing. I'm going to be talking specifically about large language models. This is a recent subset of AI. Obviously, AI goes back to the 1950s. We've had symbolic AI, expert systems, many different flavors of it. AI is more than large language models. I'm only going to talk about large language models. It's more than that. It's things you will probably have heard about, like being able to beat the world champion at Go, like being able to discover protein structures that we weren't able to enumerate before. So just to be clear about the scope there. So I typed this into ChatGPT yesterday. I said, is the world all that is the case? And it correctly picked up that that is the first line of Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. And it then proceeds to talk very confidently, kind of in a style of a Wikipedia page, about Wittgenstein's Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus. Difference, of course, is this is a single entity, which is software, and it's not a page co-created and co-edited by humans. So its provenance is extremely different, but it's very confident. It actually quotes at the bottom, there are aspects of reality, according to Wittgenstein, that cannot be meaningfully expressed in language. And this is a point I shall return to. On the other hand, I also typed into ChatGPT yesterday, if Socrates is a man and all women are mortal, what can I conclude? Well, what could I conclude, audience? Forget what it says.
Not much.
Nothing. I can conclude precisely zero from that statement. However, ChatGPT, which is pastiching stuff it's been trained on, assumes that I said all men are mortal. And if you follow this quasi-reasoning down here, it completely obliterates logic in what it does. This is another nice example from Gary Marcus's webpage. Draw me a picture with absolutely no elephants in it. Whatever you do, don't put an elephant in the picture. Okay. So on the one hand, very confident, apparently scholarly account of a rather obscure philosopher. On the other hand, hallucination, which was Cambridge Dictionary's Word of the Year 2023, and it's that word that's caused me to talk about illusion. It's actually a complete category mistake, as I will explain to you. So training a large language model, this is a slide from Andrej Karpathy, who was a Tesla AI expert and worked for OpenAI as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a comment or a question. I'm not sure. On the previous slide, the ChatGPT prompt, technically that was not an elephant in the room. So technically, it's probably right. That was not. It's an image of an elephant, or it's a symbol of an elephant, or a.
You mean it wasn't a real elephant in the picture of the room?
It was a symbol. Yes, it was not. It wasn't even realistic. So
Yeah.
you would expect an elephant perhaps to be realistic. So technically,
but you can see that the intention behind the question was thwarted there. Let's come back to these questions.
Philosophical thing.
You take a chunk of the internet. He's actually talking about an open source model here called Llama 2. ChatGPT is probably about 10 times more than that. ChatGPT, they've read about 100 terabytes, that's 100 million characters of text off the internet. And they've trained a piece of software on that. They've trained it, in this case, with 6,000 GPUs. A GPU is a type of processor that's particularly good at the kind of mathematics that's involved in transforming all of that text into a model that we can use to predict other text or generate other text from. An enormous amount of energy and compute power has gone into that, and now multiply this by 10 for ChatGPT, and you end up with about 140 gigabytes of numbers, which is essentially what's in ChatGPT. So we train on the internet. Now, I actually want to take you on a thought experiment about that training. Has anyone seen this film? It's based on a story by Ted Chiang, and actually the film's very unconvincing, I think, about what happens, which is so aliens arrive, and a woman, a linguist, talks or interacts with the aliens in order to learn one another's language. And the Ted Chiang story is particularly interesting on that question about this meeting of different beings with different cultures and the question of whether you can learn one another's language. So an alien arrives on the planet and wants to understand something about the planet. And this is a theme that's been done by other people. Craig Rain's poetry, a Martian sends a postcard home at night. When all the colors die, they hide in pairs and read about themselves in color with their eyelids shut, which is presumably two people sleeping and dreaming. But from a Martian's point of view, the question arises, what would a Martian make of our world? And this question is the one that's really concerning me here. The epistemology, the philosophical study of the nature, origin, limits of human knowledge. But obviously we could equally talk about alien knowledge, and equally we could talk about AI or machine knowledge. Okay, questions about that. And my question here is, what limits the knowledge that can be acquired by an AI or an alien as compared to a human baby? And how comparable, if you put the baby aside for the moment, how comparable is an AI in training to an arriving alien trying to understand our world? So they're all arrivals, right? The baby arrives, it's born into this world and somehow learns about this world. A computer program is run on a machine, and it's going to be trained on data that it inputs in this world. An alien arrives in this world and is going to try and understand this world. So here we have the world, and we have these three different kinds of entity. What can they learn? What can they get to know about our world? Except we actually have to get rid of almost all of that world and leave just text. Get rid of all the things, get rid of all the beings, get rid of all the nature, just text, because that is all that a large language model is ever going to input. It doesn't input physical phenomena, it doesn't input anything except for digital text. So actually we can't have that planet, we can only have text to reduce everything to the same baseline. So I actually tried to get ChatGPT to draw me a picture of a huge empty hall with no features, and it just wouldn't do it for me. It put features every time. So I've just cribbed imagine that these arrivals are in a completely blank room, no windows, nothing, nothing of any physical interest in that room. All there is in the room is text. You can't even have a book in the room because actually that would privilege the alien. You only can have digital text. That is all there is in the world. And this is a really important point. Nothing but text. Now, we are bewitched by language. When we look at words, all kinds of things happen in our heads. All kinds of mental processes happen. And as Wittgenstein said, we can be bewitched by language to the point of really confusing ourselves. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to unbewitch us. I'm going to translate all the text in the world. We'll assume for the moment it's all English. It doesn't really matter. We could translate the Spanish as well, etc. I'm going to translate every single word of text, word by word, into a unique and completely randomly chosen corresponding word. I'm going to call that garblish. So you can imagine you could take any piece of text, every word in that text and every punctuation mark in that text has a unique corresponding element of garblish, and I'm going to translate it all. Okay? So it's really important to notice that when I've translated it into garblish, the translation has exactly the same structure as the original. I'm not going to do any fancy English to French translation where you have to rephrase things because the vocabulary doesn't quite fit. I'm just doing a literal translation of all the words in English to completely randomly chosen equivalent and unique equivalents.
When you have a word in English like one word, two names.
If you can talk.
When you have a word that's one word, two meanings, read and read, or same translation? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's character
So I'm doing it literally from the text. Forget meaning altogether. I'm literally translating it. Why am I doing it then? It's to help us in our thought experiment, to help us avoid becoming bewitched by other entities' use of our language. Because when an AI spits out answer, it's using our language and we become bewitched by it. This is my thesis. I'm going to unbewitch us. Also, it's really important to note, again, make sure you agree with this, because if you don't agree with this, let's talk about it. From the point of view of a computer program running on a bunch of GPUs or an alien, there's no difference. There's literally no difference because it's just a bunch of symbols, of tokens that it's never seen before. But it has exactly the same structure as the English original. Yeah.
Well, you say that has the same. You say that has the same structure, but individual words in the English language or in any language that we know have internal structure as well, and
Fine.
that correlates.
Yeah, that's a good point. So actually, I've simplified things because actually, if you look at the way large language models really work, they actually look at identical substructures of words, and I really should have done it at a kind of syllable level. It doesn't matter. I mean, we'll do that as well, right? I can do anything like that. It doesn't really matter what the unit is. I can do it, and I can substitute garblish, okay? But the structure is exactly the same. So I've got no other physical reality, no reality at all, nothing, just text, and I've got structure which is completely the same as the text I started out with. So that we've got these two kinds of entity in this room, looking at some garblish. Okay, and there's actually 100 terabytes of this garblish in this room. That's actually some garbishized piece of code, and that is text. Yeah.
Could I just ask one more annoying question?
You use the microphone, please.
Sorry, one more annoying question. Just the aliens, just a question about them. Do they have a written language of their own? Have they developed writing?
I don't know.
Okay.
So the question now arises, what can one learn? What can you ascertain? I'll try not to use too loaded language here, from text alone. Well, all that you could possibly, as a matter of logic, learn is the statistics of the properties of which token appears in which locations in relation to other tokens in that. Okay, I've highlighted some, jfug, ok, and muv. If you think about doing that over 100 terabytes of text, there's going to be patterns about the relationships in which these occur in relation to one another. Okay, and it'll be borne out. What is text? It's not just random stuff. It is actually language that we produced. It is, in fact, something that bears a relationship to the world in which we live. It is, in fact, something that we in our brains can process, can produce and absorb. It's not just random stuff. It has a structure. It has a very definite structure. And all we can do is learn the internal structural relationships between the symbols in that text. And that is all that a computer program running on any computer anywhere can do, if it's all you give it is text. There's nothing else it can do. And the only question is, how sophisticated is that model? Well, it turns out we can do it pretty well in order that we can predict which token comes next. Remember, I'm talking tokens here, I'm not talking words, because these are meaningless tokens. So, for example, it quite possibly, if you gave it all of that and then stop there, it could probably, with high probability, say that the next token was going to be that one. Because it's had 100 terabytes of text to train on, right? That's a lot of data. I simplified. I just want to put in correct a simplification I made. Actually, there's a few more steps to the training of ChatGPT. One in particular, because it's a bit curious. People always say this. Well, all it's doing is predicting the next token of text. Which, yeah, but hang on. I wrote a prompt and then it produced this stuff. Well, it turns out that actually they get human beings to create. They devise some prompts, get human beings to write an answer. And they do that to around hundreds of thousands of samples, and they train it on that as well. So that kind of question-answer format that we're used to seeing, that's been trained on instances created by human beings and checked. In fact, there were companies whose job it is to create these instances to train ChatGPT and the like. Okay. Interesting question here. Are aliens and AIs equivalent in this task? No, they definitely are not. If you've arrived in a spaceship, you know physics, you know mathematics, you would know code, you know logic. And since you know those things, you know, you can probably kind of start to kind of see code when you see it. Okay, that has no separate category for a computer program at all. It's just, I mean, there are some syntactic properties there that you could, in principle, get at, but there's no knowledge of those things that the AI has compared to the alien. So AIs have an algorithm with absolutely no meaning, the equivalent of the cognitive processes that it took in those aliens to build a spaceship and come here. It's very different.
I don't understand why.
Sorry, can you use the microphone, please?
How the letters and the human being can actually translate, but the human brain is specific, and at the same time, it creates everything.
I'm not sure I understand.
Every images, yeah. I mean, a computer is not like a human brain to a large extent.
I absolutely agree with you, but I'm trying not to address quite that bigger question. I'm just trying to point out the epistemological failings of our approach to AI at the moment. And it's like this. This is a cartoon that I found on Twitter recently. So we have a graph here from not tasty to tasty. We have a scale from millimeters to millions of meters. Okay. This end, we've got grapes. They're round things, right? They're round. At this point, we've got the Earth and the Moon. They're round too. Okay. So if you interpolate, if you assume there's a line between these, well, there must be something that is an 800-meter sphere that tastes okay, right? And it's not so different, actually. It's a bit subtler in ChatGPT, but effectively there is, in a kind of literally a multi-dimensional, very many dimensional, sort of hundreds of dimensions of text analysis space, which is what they base it all on. When they analyze that text, they produce a multi-dimensional space of variation in text. There is a kind of curve in there that it's produced, and every training point is a kind of point on that curve, and every time you give it a prompt, it interpolates to find what it should produce on that curve. Okay, so it's actually doing something more subtle than this, but not so different. So, do computer programs hallucinate? Absolutely not. A bug-free AI program always produces correct output, every time it is correct. Because you have to say it's correct in relationship to its specification, to what it's supposed to do, okay? And what it's supposed to do is statistically produce a set of tokens based on your prompt, right? And it's done its statistical thing perfectly correctly, and it's produced some tokens. You don't like them? Hard luck. You're the one that's hallucinating. You are hallucinating that there was meaning to be found in the tokens that it's produced. Okay. Statistically speaking, it's outputted a statistically valid sequence of tokens. You know the meanings of those words, and you know there's a problem there, but that is not in its universe at all. That's in our universe. Hang on. So I've translated everything into gibberish, but hang on, but actual language is kind of like a picture of the world, isn't it? You can't just do that. All we've got to do is scale everything up, use actual language, and we'll very soon reach artificial and general intelligence, we'll have consciousness, nobody will have to work anymore, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So, am I wrong about this? Well, I claim not. Let's pursue that idea a bit further, though. Again, to come back to the beginning of the Tractatus, the world is everything that is the case. The world is the totality of facts, not of things. Right? I got rid of the world. Maybe that's okay. It's all about facts. The world is determined by the facts, and by these being all the facts. So, propositions express facts about the world, and by examining our propositions, in other words, our language, we can understand everything there is. You give me language, actual language, don't give me this gibberish, give me actual language, then we can understand everything about the form of the world. And in particular, if we've got our facts in a database, then we can just use large language models to generate everything. We don't need human beings.
Can I raise a point? The Tractatus by Wittgenstein was superseded by philosophical investigation.
Thank you for talking about the point I'm about to make.
Facts don't exist. Facts are things made, factum est. So they're actually made according to requirement. There are no such thing as facts, qua facts.
Okay, I don't agree with that, but I am coming to Wittgenstein's undermining of his own position. So, yeah, you can have a database. It'll look like that. It's in garblish. Computer programs only work on garblish. Okay, there's no such thing as a digital fact. Agree with you there. There's no such thing as a digital fact. There are, however, such things as biochemical facts. But any table in your database is going to look like that. And it begs all the questions, like this actually, let's say, is a database of employees in a certain company, right? And the embedding of that database into our world is a very complex question. Okay, so you can't just have databases. Another question.
I'd like to challenge one concept about putting it into a nonsense language, because what you call garblish is very structured grammatically, and it's structured in English grammatically. So it is not entirely nonsense. It already has a structure. Okay. Because in fact, excuse me, one more thing. When you say discovered patterns, aren't you just code breaking like they did in World War II? I mean, so it's not entirely nonsense language.
Okay. Well, I should say that when I said that, I was not arguing my position. I was arguing somebody who wants to argue with me. Okay. Imagine a Silicon Valley tech bro saying that, right? Who's just, got his $3 million for his AI startup, and all of this is complete heresy to him, and it is a him probably. Sorry guys, nope, you can't have that. Sorry guys too. Mr. Wittgenstein totally refuted his original position in his subsequent work. He said, in complete contradistinction to his initial position, that words have a grammar, as he called it, or a meaning, which varies according to the context of use, and that would be a physical context in terms of setting an action. That can be a cultural context in terms of understandings between the interlocutors in that conversation. And it can be a linguistic also context. So when a word appears in a piece of text, there is that context too, actually, to be fair to the LLM people. This is the famous duck rabbit. Is it a duck? Is it a rabbit? It's both. It's both. And our mind can freely switch between those two things if you leave it free floating. But obviously, if you drew some water here, say, you would probably think it was a duck, right? Or if you put Watershed down above it, you'd probably think it was a rabbit, okay? And that's how we deal with words. That's precisely the same word or precisely the same symbol has different meanings according to the context. And if you read this, which I highly recommend you do, he talks about language games in which the meaning of the words can only be understood in terms of a set of behaviors in which those words are taking place and being uttered. So this idea that text is a picture of the world is completely false. The other thing is, what is this text that they pulled off the internet without asking anybody? Well, some of it is true. Some of it is false. Some of it, to be understood, requires implicit context that's not contained in that text. Just as, if I say, the clock's on the blink, if I say the clock's on the blink and I point, you'll understand it's the clock behind me, right? But I never said that. I never said which clock I was talking about. There's fiction. Neither true nor false. There's poetry. Think of that Craig Rain. Imagine you were to try and take the poem. Imagine you were to try and take that literally. Okay. There's all kinds of forms of language in the corpus that that's been trained on. This is a real experiment, by the way, that was recently done. They attached a webcam to a baby's head and they recorded what the baby heard and saw. And because if you do that, it'll be just like a baby, won't it? I mean, the same piece of software will be just like a baby. Surely if you strap a webcam to somebody's forehead and you record everything. Well, not really, no, because it begs all the questions of how the digital data that's being recorded is different from the biochemical data that's entering a sophisticated biochemical construct that's the product of millions of years of evolution. It's not the same. So, are you asking a question? Sorry.
I would like to.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I'm okay for time, actually. Yes.
Well, the whole point of digital text is not the same as biochemical data that's being inputted into a real human being. Couldn't you make the argument that a really, 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 really advanced software could replicate biochemical data through coding, not language in terms of English language, but the language of binary code and replicating every atom, that kind of thing? Obviously, that's not remotely within the realms of possibility right now, but.
Well, I say two things about that. One is simulation, it's not emulation. So I can simulate nuclear fusion in this. I can't have nuclear fusion in that. There are real material distinctions between simulations of things and their reality. And the other thing is that our sensoria, our vision, hearing systems, everything, is actually wired up to an incredibly sophisticated organ that we don't understand anything about, really. When you think about, it's like 2% or something. Yeah. So, you could hypothesize that we could recreate that. But I don't actually accept that if you simulated the whole thing, you would necessarily end up with the same phenomena, viz. Nuclear fusion in my, yeah.
Okay, so when this text was fed in to the computer, it may not have been labelled. It may not have been told, this is fiction, this is rhetoric, this is sarcasm, this is a deadpan statement, it was a speech, it was an encyclopedia. But can that be added at a subsequent stage in future programming?
Isn't it? I asked myself the same question, actually, after I said that. I thought, well, actually, maybe they do have some way of, but when you think about getting 100 terabytes of text off the internet, it's not really practical. I mean, how are you going to classify it? Because humans aren't going to classify it for you. You'd have to have some software that classified it, which begs the whole question in the first place. So I don't think it was. I don't think it was. I don't know, but I don't think it was.
But it could be added.
In principle, but in practice, you'd have to label, you'd have to have humans labeling all the text in the world. Yeah. So, I'm kind of reaching the end and we can have Q&A, but so large language models do statistics on text tokens, which we know as words. Each token has a particular place or a particular kind of, you could call it a meaning in the corpus of all text. But human text is not in one-to-one correspondence with reality. It's a multiply complicated relationship, okay? LLMs are epistemologically broken, in other words, because they are not connected to reality. The really curious thing I find about this is that AI researchers appear not to be curious about this fact. They are so busy writing their papers and getting their millions of pounds worth of funding, nobody seems to want to ask that question. Why does nobody want to ask that question? Because there is no solution to it. There is no solution to it. To describe the relationship between language and the world well, it's 2 millennia of philosophers have not managed it. What have we got now that would enable us to answer that question? Nothing. So it's a complete, semantic crevasse in their work, but they don't want to face it, and they don't want to face it because illusion. There's all these quick wins where it actually does appear to do us some good, right? It appears to be writing confidently about Wittgenstein, okay? And let's not worry about those times when it doesn't do that. Let's not worry about those times when it's completely unreliable. Scale will solve this problem. This is what a lot of people say. A lot of people in AI research actually are wise to that and know that's not true, but a lot of people are still saying that. So that's the theoretical gap in AI research. But there's also this side of things. I'm kind of more or less going to end on this. We are bewitched by another kind of entity's confident use of our language. And we want to believe it has this power. It depends who we is about why. If I'm a Silicon Valley corporation, of course I damn well want it because I'm going to be very rich. But if I'm just one of us, I don't know whether you probably can't see, actually, I've got Jack and the Beanstalk in the back there. I've got a fairy tale in the back there. We want to believe in power. We want to believe in magic. We want to believe in the goose that lays the golden egg, because some of it might come to us, right? Why does so much of this nation want the royalty to be there? We want to believe in that power. So we allow ourselves to be witched. So all I want you to do after this talk is just say garblish to the lot of it. And I'm going to leave on that slide. I'm plugging my book, which has AI in it, and my software platform. I won't say any more about them. I'm just going to leave them there for you to look while you ask questions.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Your hand was the first up.
First of all, language is not only the spoken language.
Sorry, can you hold it?
Oh, people have discovered tribes who do not know any language except their own particular language, and yet they communicate, you know, by having they just got into contact. Not sign language, it's just a sort of humanistic.
Well, there's non-verbal communication.
Non-verbal.
Yes, of course, of course.
That's anything. And
yeah.
If you have an animal, they can communicate very easily with nothing. For example, if you have a horse and they can communicate and trust you, why? They don't know. And it's the same as other animals as well. And maybe it's the mammalian, thing, because young mammals communicate with you, but when they get older, they go into the species. They regenerate and it's more than just letters. It's more than speech. It's more than anything. It just happens.
Sure. I was only restricting myself to text because that's all that large language machines will. Yeah.
But if
some
a
other
text with with the communication, which is not text.
We've got quite a few questions, I think.
I'm going to go to online.
Hi, I've got a question from Leon Robson. What are your thoughts on using AI within the creative sector, especially in regard to graphic design?
Well, first of all, I should say that I would make exactly the same. So there's generative image making and there's generative video making, right? I would make exactly the same arguments about that. The only thing I would do is there, instead of text tokens, we're talking about patches of pixels, essentially. And it's all about the relationships between patches of pixels. And exactly the same argument about the meaninglessness of what's produced. And if you look at that video I was showing at the beginning, there's total non-physics going on there because it's not actually based on anything real. But obviously there's a huge political questions about the appropriation of people's artwork by corporations, and then the training of models on this. And that's kind of a separate question. I deliberately didn't go into the political questions in this talk, because I wanted to keep to this point.
For your other talk.
Yeah, listen, yeah.
Anybody else?
I've got a question.
Can we just go to people who haven't spoken yet first? Sorry? Yes, you have.
Hi, Tim. I do like ethics as a term, just because that's my jam. I feel like you were arguing against the hype train and the language that we use to communicate what AI is doing. And are you, if that's the case, is that true? And also, are you arguing that you also dislike the technology in of itself? Because it seems like you are, negative. And I was wondering if you are excited about any element of this that you presented and think that it could be used in different ways and that sort of thing.
Yes, I am operating against the hype machine. If you think about the applications of different sorts of AI to things like the uncovering of protein structures, then it's obviously useful, and I'm all for that. I did carefully say that it's this particular form of generative AI that seems to be particularly bad in terms of hype at the moment. So I think that's all I would say, really. Yeah.
I used to be involved in safety, and one of the things that does bother me is that does the order in which you present information, text information to the large language model alter its structure? So if you presented it one way, and the sort of sub-question of that is if you cross-compared different languages which have slightly different interpretations. For example, snow might mean one thing to us, but for an Eskimo, or say it might mean practically nothing, because to me it might have 30 or 40 words to describe snow. Yes.
Well, the first question, I don't think we know the answer to that. So if you trained, it's a neural network. If you train a neural network and you vary the order in which the training occurs, I don't think we know whether you'd end up with a different result. I mean, it's something you could test empirically, of course. You could find that out. But I don't think we know, especially on a large amount of text like that. The question about the actual meaning of words in different languages, I've tried to show that that's irrelevant to large language models. There is no meaning. Nothing means anything. It's just a text token. I think Sam's had a question.
Thanks, Tim. It's a fascinating talk. My question was about animal intelligence. So it strikes me we don't need to go to Mars to think of other intelligences. And I was thinking that a bumblebee with a tiny pinhead is able to find its way back on a cloudy day better than a human being with a sat-nav.
Yeah. That's why I've got bees in here, actually, because they're intelligent.
So is there, are there maps which are concealed in language, or charts or conceptual plans that actually would offer some scope for finding our way in this world?
For finding our way, as opposed to the AI trying to find a way. I mean, obviously, there is a huge amount of structure in text. As I've tried to say, it's a huge amount of structure, and we can leverage it to produce, in many occasions, very confidently, perfectly good text, you know. So there is a huge amount of structure in what we produce as language. And I don't know that it's a map to us. I mean, it's just, it means what it means to us anyway, doesn't it? It's not, I don't think we need more from text than we already get from text, I think.
I think probably for others, but the hype is the problem. The problem is not with the technology. The problem is with the way it's being, or people are trying to apply it. So, you know, LLMs are based on text, and so actually, yes, they're very good at generating text, but we're looking at it and saying, oh, this is going to solve problems. And is this not just, this happens with every technology. You know, this probably happened with the invention of electricity, that people say, oh, it's going to, you know, it's going to babysit your kids or something. And it's not. It's just that people don't understand inherently how to apply, especially complex technology, because what's the phrase about, you know,
well, I'd put that question back to you. How do you apply it so you get correct results? I don't think there is a way.
Yeah, so the only time I've ever used it is for drafting. Actually, it's very good when I need to write something. I'm like, give me, because I struggle to like the blank page problems. I'm like, give me a cover letter for a job application, blah, blah, blah. And then you go through as a human and edit it. And in that sense, actually, yes, it works. But I totally agree that hyping that this is going to solve all our problems and nobody will need to work and AI will raise our kids and farm crops and blah, blah, blah is, you know, not the same thing.
And that's fine. I know lots of people say that. They use it for drafting things, and then they, assuming they know what they're doing, it's fine. There are other things that people do with it which aren't quite so harmless. So, for example, a lot of people can't be bothered to read something, a long document, so they get it to summarize it for them. They have no idea whether that's an accurate summary, and they're not going to find out because they're not going to read the book.
But the problem isn't necessarily the technology, it's the way people are applying the technology.
Well, the technology does have severe limitations, as I've sought to show. And I don't think people, because they're bewitched by it, I don't think they appreciate it. And I think it's a non-trivial problem to try and get people to realise just how limited it actually is.
Yeah, I like bewitched bits. It's a society problem more than it's a technology problem, though. It's
yeah.
Thinking of the use of this technology, one of the key facts for a human receiving that text is, was it made or edited by a human, or was it made or edited by a large language model? If we know that, we can make a judgment, can't we?
You can make some kind of judgment, but of course we as humans are also flawed. I mean, people often make the argument, they say, well, so it doesn't get it right all the time, but humans don't either. But it's not really the point. The point is that we can get it right. We do actually have ways of thinking about the world which are kind of analytical. And we can all make mistakes, like I could produce a mathematical proof which was wrong. Okay, and people have done that. But once it's in the world as a piece of reasoning, and other people can come along and point out where it's wrong. Same with science, right? It's societally correctable. There's nothing correctable about this. You can't correct the weights in a neural network according to the semantics that it was never processed with in the first place.
You mentioned at the beginning, but the garbage that it produced this week, I was wondering if you could just mention it to everyone, what happened and what you think about it.
Yeah, so I've actually got a slide here about that. What it did was it was producing weird combinations of Spanish and English and things like that for quite a few people for quite a long time. And it's quite interesting. This is one of the OpenAI engineers. I haven't got the example here, but this is their response, unexplained response. On February the 20th, an optimization to the user experience introduced a bug, right? So this is an actual bug, right? Remember I said it's correct except when you've got a bug. With how the model processes language. LLMs generate responses by randomly sampling words based in part on probabilities. Their language consists of numbers that map to tokens. So they're, in a sense, fessing up about, actually this is about the output rather than the training, but they're kind of admitting that there's a lack of semantics, of real semantic processing in the final stages of it there.
Thanks, by the way, really good talk.
Thanks.
It's quite cathartic to hear it criticised. When you talk about all of those GPUs, big stacks of computers, and people say, let's scale it up, we just got to keep infinitely getting more and more computers to work it out. Is there anything, are you worried about that at all in the context of climate change? Like, it's not infinite, there's finite resources on the planet for processing this sort of stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people make this point that it's an awful lot of energy to train these models, actually executing models. So when you use ChatGPT, when the model is running, not being trained, it's nothing like as computationally intensive. That's how come it can respond to you relatively quickly. But when it's being trained, it's a huge amount of compute cycles. It's a huge amount of energy, huge amount of resources like water used in the cooling. So it does have, this is an argument that people often make about Bitcoin, subject to another of my talks, which is environmentally positively scandalous, that they waste so much energy on Bitcoin. And, we can disagree about how useful this is, but we can agree that it's taking up a lot of energy. A lot of energy.
Yeah, just two little points really. Just thinking about the information going in, the data going in. And I think there's a real gap for information on the internet that's just no longer accurate. It's out of date. We're getting to the point where there's just so much data. We need some way of cleansing it to be able to use good stuff, and that's tagged, labelled, dated, and then it's much more usable, I think. And the other thing, what you were saying is sort of power and money. I think we're always looking at these things for efficiency. It's ways of doing things quicker, faster, taking out the labour, which I suppose does then result in saving of money. But I think it's a human, whenever you look at doing something, you're always looking, could I be doing it in a better way, quicker way? So if this can aid and be used in that way, then I think it could be beneficial in lots of areas.
Yeah. Well, again, to the question of cleansing the internet, there's a practical question to that and a political question to that, because one person's Yeah. So I mean, I don't see it happening ever myself. I think there is a need for regulation of. I mean, the implications of fake videos and fake text at a time of elections is obviously should be concerning to all of us. And there is a real question about regulation. How you do that, I don't know, because it can be watermarked originally, but there are ways around that. So when you look at something, you won't be able to look at something in the bits of it to tell you whether it's fake or not. So that's a real problem. The second point you made was about, so, I mean, these bits of software know nothing about human life. They have no creativity. They are only tools, and they will not replace us in very many jobs that we do at the moment. It's just not going to happen. Just not going to happen.
Hi, really interesting talk. Fantastic, generative in its own way.
Right.
And during which I have to say I tried the elephant in the room thing, and I got exactly the same result using Bing's.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
But anyway, my question is: can a language model, or let's say artificial white intelligence, ever grasp the concept of semantics, given the fact that, like, meaning is for lack of a better word, a concept that we create based on our sensory experiences, what our brain receives, our predictions about something.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much everything a construct of our mind, which, as neuroscientists say, that's a controlled hallucination in itself. So something non-biological. Something do you think even at an AGI, artificial white intelligence might be able to?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously can't rule that out at all. All I can say is that, this is not a digital thing inside my head. It's a biochemical thing. And you can simulate it if only we understood how it worked, which of course we don't. But if we did understand how it worked, we could simulate it. But it doesn't follow that you would get the same phenomena that I'm experiencing right now in terms of consciousness, etc. It just doesn't follow. But I obviously cannot rule it out. But I would say that if that's where you're headed, we're in a cul-de-sac right now. Yeah.
Hi, sorry. I also enjoyed the talk and agree with your thesis that there's this semantic problem. I kind of want to ask a question that flips it a bit on its head, which is, given that you're largely arguing that these aren't general models, they're specific models that do just word soup that we happen to recognize. Do you see any sort of like anything we can learn from our bewitchment by that, in the same way that you might by reading experimental literature? I'm sort of reminded of Girl is a Half-Formed Thing, this Irish novel where the language starts to develop as the character sort of grows from a child to a young woman. Right. And becomes more sort of, at the beginning it's kind of very hard to read and it becomes more legible. And so sort of seeing these, sort of seeing the experiments of what is bewitching about it and what isn't, when you see something you're like, oh, I believe that. And when you see something where you're like, that's not logic, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like, there's some experiments here and it's kind of a mirror, because people have made this, so it's not just entirely gibberish.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but I mean, obviously our thought processes are very influenced by the conceptual framework that we've already built up in ourselves, our tendency to try and make everything fit, all the evidence actually fit the thing that we want it to be evidence for. We do have those processes, which no doubt in evolutionary terms had an advantage at some point, but I don't really know how in the case of language, which is the very stuff of our lives, these words that we even think in them, kind of. It's really hard to understand how we could ever remove ourselves from that, except through this kind of artifice that I've come up with today. I don't know whether I've completely understood your question, but that would be my response. I don't really see it unbewitching ourselves about language. The thing is that the real distinction is it me speaking as a human being, or is it a machine apparently speaking? That's we ought to be able to unbewitch ourselves about, it seems to me.
So it's really just the problem of like intention.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so.
All right, I think that's probably all we've got time for today, but I think Tim can hang around for a little bit if anyone wants to argue more vociferously with him. Before you all go, if you want to stick around in Hot Desk today, find out more about what we do, please come find one of the studio team and we will let you know. Studio team, give us a wave. You're at the back there. Vic, wave. Vic with the headphones on is one of the studio team also. We will be happy to help. If you're watching online, you can drop us a line on studio@watershed.co.uk with any questions. Thank you all for being here today, and we'll see you all again next week.
Thank you.